Penn State and Ohio State goes down this week. This duel goes down Saturday night at the Bryce Jordan Center. Will you be there or will you be watching on TV? Of course, this is on the Big Ten Network. That's the best way to watch the Penn State and Ohio State match. Now, Penn State has won for, so many years in a row. Of course, they did lose in 2015 the national championship to Ohio State, but they beat them in duels consecutively pretty much every single year. Now, the last time Ohio State actually won at Penn State was back in 2009. So it's been over 10 years since Ohio State's won. I believe that's the exact date. So it's been so long since they've won. And how are they going to do now against Penn State? We're going to talk about that as well as what all of the matchups are. So Penn State right now in the season is 10-2, where Ohio State is 10-3. Penn State has their losses to Iowa as well as Arizona State at the beginning of the year, but they have nice wins over Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Minnesota. On the other side, Ohio State has a loss to Iowa, but victories over Arizona State. Their other losses are to Virginia Tech and Nebraska. Now, let's go through these lineups and talk exactly about what this lineup is going to look like. So these are the lineups right here going on, and I'll go through each of these as well as what the most probable kind of scenario is going to be. And please, before I go any further, comment below on what you think is going to happen in this duel, and make sure that you leave your prediction. So number 2 Penn State versus number 6 Ohio State. Big time rivalry over the past couple of years. Myself as a Penn State fan, this is a duel I've always loved to watch. Now, we will see, the biggest match of the night is obviously going to be Luke Pletcher versus Nick Lee at 141, but we are going to see some other big time matchups. Ohio State's bringing 7 ranked guys. Penn State's bringing 8 ranked guys. The newest guy in the ranking this week is Jared Verkleeren. Starting off at 125, this is a match where it's not really going to be that exciting, to be honest with you. The most recent common opponent is Brandon Cray of Maryland, where Ohio State actually won that. Penn State lost, both by decisions, though. So, this is a match I see going most likely in a decision. I could see this being a toss-up either way, a Hanselman or Meredith. Both are solid wrestlers, but this is a match I see ending in a decision. At 133, RBY's been looking solid. Really just coming into it. I would say all year, but he's really been coming into it, driving into it this past couple weeks. Beating Austin DeSanto, or injury default, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Nearly beating Seth Gross. He didn't beat him. He got splayed, but he did out-wrestle him, in my opinion. Now, right here, Jordan Decatur was a guy who was ranked number 20 in the country before he lost to King Sandoval of Maryland. And he was a guy, to be honest with you, I think Decatur is a guy who was ranked high because he had an Ohio State singlet. He had a nice win earlier on in the season. I believe it was over Kramer, but he's kind of shifted from there. Gross, RBY on the other hand, had Tech followed Sandoval, who Decatur had lost to. He had a close match with Gross, as well as Alvarez, actually, and beat Kramer. So those are all common opponents, or similar opponents right there. That'll be an exciting matchup at 133, but Rome Ravillon's really looking strong. Match of the night, look, it's Pletcher and Lee. Pletcher and Lee at 141. Pletcher right now in the season has a 65% bonus point percentage, whereas Nick Lee has 94%. All that meaning is that these two guys score points. They're going for points every single match. And to be honest with you, these two guys have really been excelling this year. Both of them. Both of these guys have been scoring. They've been aggressive. It's the best I've ever seen either of them wrestle in their entire careers. And they've stepped it up this year, and it's exciting to see Pletcher up a weight, now taking on Nick Lee. As far as common opponents for these two, Pletcher this year so far has beat Mitch McKee as well as majored Tristan Moran of Wisconsin. He's also majored Chad Red. Similarly, Nick Lee has a major over Chad Red, a major over Moran, but he actually pinned McKee, and that's like the one little difference there, is that Nick Lee has a couple more pins than Luke Pletcher, but I see this being a thrilling thrilling match with these two. So that is, of course, the matchup of the night, in my humble opinion. Luke Pletcher and Nick Lee. We'll be talking a little bit about who is the better wrestler here. I mean, we'll find out, of course, this weekend. But moving on now to 149, Sammy Sasso. That is the other Ohio State wrestler who is ranked number 1 in the country, going up against Jared Verkleeren, the newly ranked wrestler for Penn State at 149. Now, Sasso has had a strong season, although he started out with a couple losses to Virginia Tech as well as to Brayton Lee. He avenged both of those losses and ended up beating who was the number 1 ranked guy in the country at the time, in Pat Lugo, in a duel. Right now, he is number 1 in the weight class. Verkleeren, on the other hand, has a loss to Brayton Lee this past week in a what some people thought was like a phantom point giveaway, but no, he actually lost mostly because of stalling calls. That is what hurt him. He does have a win, his best win, upcoming this past couple weeks over Wisconsin's Martin. He had a close match with Pat Lugo. Wrestled relatively decent. I don't think he was wrestling to win there, but I see Verk kind of coming into it a little bit. Moving on to 157, we have Pfeiffer and Cleary, and these two guys couldn't be more similar. They both have losses to Deacon, close matches against Caleb Romero. They're both juniors. Both have very similar records. This is another match, kind of like 125. I see being exciting in a different way than a Nick Lee versus Luke Pletcher, but I see that being a decent match there and a real toss-up. At 165, we have Ethan Smith, number 14 in the country, going up against Vincenzo Joseph. Now, Smith right now is 15-10 on the season. He was pinned by Isaiah White of Nebraska and has a decision over David McFadden. So, on the other hand, we have Vincenzo Joseph, who has massive wins on the season, of course, over Alex Marinelli, over Evan Wick, major over Evan Wick most recently, actually, which very much impressed me. Vincenzo Joseph is looking tough to beat this year. It may be tough for Smith to do it, but we've seen him pull off upsets in the past, so who knows? At 174 is Romero, actually. Is Romero. So Romero has a loss to Labriola on the season, as well as to Kemmerer. Now, he does have a win over Devin Skatska, and that's probably his best win, but Mark Hall, listen, he pinned Labriola in an exciting last, 10-second of the match, pin to end up helping Penn State win the duel over Nebraska. And ever since he lost to Michael Kemmerer, he has been on fire, and there's the fire burning inside of him. You can just see it. He's just pinning guys fast. He's not getting too fired up about it. He's just going out there. He's winning. He's got one thing on his mind, and that's that national championship. And that's why I think it was almost scary now that Kemmerer beat Hall. And Romero's going to have his hands full. Moving on now to 184. We have a younger matchup in Rocky Jordan going up against Aaron Brooks. Now, this is a redshirt freshman in Jordan going up against a true freshman Brooks, number 12 in the country versus number 8. Another very similar matchup to in this match, kind of like that 157, but in a different way. We just saw the Assad versus Brooks match. Very exciting victory for Brooks there. Very solid match when Assad came out very strong. Now, Jordan has a loss to Assad, whereas Brooks has a win, but they also kind of flip-flop with Taylor Venz, Taylor Venz is a guy who comes out, has solid victories over Darmstadt, but then he loses to Assad, but he has a win over Brooks. So this weight's a one that's kind of all over the place here. But this will be a good matchup here just because it's two young guys for the program. It'll help us see where these two will be going forward, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of those two wrestling in the future. At 197 is Colin Moore, number 1 in the country, against Shakur Rasheed. Of course, this is Ohio State's third number 1 ranked wrestler to Penn State, who only has 1. I mean, this has to be one of the first times in many years where Ohio State has more number 1 ranked wrestlers than Penn State, because in the past, we've seen these two teams come in with 7 of the top 10 ranked guys in the country between both teams, which is impressive. This year, we see 4 of those in the entire country, with Sasso, Pletcher, Moore, and then Joseph on Penn State's side. Hall would have been if he wouldn't have lost to Kemmerer. Now, more in history is 2-0 against Shakur Rasheed. Beat him a couple years ago at Big Tens and at Nationals. But Moore has had some issues at Penn State, of course, losing a couple years ago to Anthony Cassard. But to be honest with you, I think Colin Moore's mindset has kind of shifted a little bit this year in certain ways. I think he's a little bit more relaxed, but he's wrestling even better than he has in the past. And I watched actually a little bit of a short on him on the Big Ten Network Wrestling channel, which I highly recommend that you check out, with how Colin Moore processed his upsetting losses over the past season. And I think he has that over Shakur Rasheed, who's still dealing with a couple of lingering injuries. He's looking a little bit better in these past couple of matches, but I don't know if he's going to be able to hang with Colin Moore. At 285, we get to the heavyweight match, and before I talk about that, I do want to say that I'll tell you my score predictions for the Penn State's best case, Ohio State's best case, as well as the most likely case to happen. So 285, we get to Traub and Nevels. Traub and Nevels, both battled against top guys like Stevenson, Cassiope, Hilger. Between the two, I don't think either of them are necessarily there yet at the top, but those are those two guys finally at 285. But let's discuss now the best scoring scenarios, as well as what I think is actually going to happen. So the Penn State's best case scenario, I believe, is a 27-10 victory. This is with obviously them winning every single toss-up, as well as pulling off the upset at 141. And I don't want to call it an upset necessarily, but it's an upset as far as rankings are concerned, but I do think that that match can go either way, and I'm excited to see where that goes, because we could see those two wrestle this weekend, as well as Big Tens and Nationals. Next up, Ohio State's best case scenario. I could see them winning 19-15, but they need to have wins at 125, which is a toss-up, 157, which is a toss-up, 141, which is going to be a tough battle. And 184 is another bout that Ohio State will need to win in that Rocky Jordan versus Aaron Brooks match for them to end up pulling off this victory, because I think a couple of their locks are Colin Moore as well as Sammy Sasso. But on the other side, we have locks from Vincenzo Joseph and Mark Hall. I hesitate to say lock because anything can happen, but as far as those guys, they're some of the top guys, not just on their team, not just in the Big Ten, but in the entire country, pound for pound, those guys. And that's why my scenario where I see Penn State winning 21-13, but I could see, like I said, I could see this going a couple of different ways depending on what happens. Penn State does have the home mat advantage, being at the Bryce Jordan Center. That the BJC is going to be electric. I wish I could be there, but please let me know your score predictions in the comments down below.